My name is Dr. Sylvia Henry, Chairperson of the National Task Force on Literacy Education, and it is my pleasure to welcome all guests who are here in the studio of the Media Resource Department here at Gemmots Lane, as well as those who are viewing online. Since the official launch of the task force on March 6, 2024, we've been forging partnerships with various entities, with educational institutions, with community organizations, government agencies to develop and implement initiatives that will help to actuate our mandate. And as our Minister McConney said during the launch, the task force is not meant in all aspects to reinvent the wheel. I therefore want to thank all those who have been working with us, and we've been reaching out to so many organizations. You may not have heard our name called, but we have been working with them to direct many of their activities to the promotion of literacy education in Barbados for the good of all. And even last weekend, we joined with the National Library Service to deliver an absolutely exciting, what we called Guess the Mystery Reader activity for our children, and that was done in advance of World Book Day. We continue our interactions with our friends at the Rotary Club of Barbados West, and just on Tuesday, which was World Book Day, we received hundreds of books for our community projects, and also President Reeves donated a check to the Erdiston Teachers Training College to promote sign language literacy. We are also very grateful to the many Calypsonians and the artists and other literacy advocates who have produced several videos, and I hope that you've been listening to those videos, you've been watching those videos. And they've produced several videos to promote literacy. And of course, we're thankful to the media. The media have been sharing our messages. Very soon, we will start our community pop-ups. And what are community pop-ups? You will see us in your communities. And we intend to offer what we call just-in-time pop-up visits, because who knows? There may be someone in the community who needs help, maybe struggling to fill that form out to get that job, maybe trying to fill that application out to get a passport, maybe trying to understand that homework project. And we intend to just pop up in your community to give just-in-time literacy assistance. Additionally, the task force has been analyzing existing data and some very startling findings. And very soon we intend to approach some schools to discuss various intervention and remediation strategies. But this evening you're not here to hear all that. We're doing so many things that you'll hear in time. You are here today because you've joined at the start of our Spotlight Conversation series, which is part of our awareness and engagement initiative. So I welcome you to what we are calling Meet Me Under the Streetlight. Let's talk. What's literacy got to do with you? And you may ask me, Sylvia, why under the streetlight? And this would be my response. The streetlight effect has long been a metaphor for knowledge and illumination. Barbadians recognize the village streetlight as the place where persons went, and I could have actually said the standpipe too, but where persons went for vibrant discussion, for sharing, and for information. These conversations are really to engage various spotlight groups, and if anyone in the audience, if you want your group to be a part of the spotlight conversations, you can meet me under the streetlight as well. But the conversations are to engage various spotlight groups to bring knowledge and illumination. And we aim to foster an awareness of the current definition of literacy. So by the time we are through this evening, you will learn more about the new definition of literacy. We aim to discuss the extent to which literacy or illiteracy impacts development within each context, and we aim to garner recommendations for the transformation of literacy education in Barbados. The life of the task force does not allow us to make this transformation. So therefore, it is important that we get the recommendations to present a comprehensive report to the Minister and the Ministry of Education. So I'm delighted to host our first panel of educators with me. Under the spotlight, I'm going to introduce each member of the panel. There is an excuse for our member from the Barbados Union of Teachers. She had an unfortunate incident, and we don't have a replacement, but we wish her well. So I will start by introducing the members of the panel. Dr. Cora Belgrave. Cora Belgrave is a lecturer in linguistics and communication studies at the University of the West Indies Cayfield campus. She coordinated and taught in the university's use of English program at the Cayfield campus and in the linguistics program. She's also a trained teacher with over 15 years experience in the primary school system. Dr. Belgrave served as Deputy Dean in the Faculty of Humanities and Education with responsibility for graduate studies and outreach for 3 years. She's currently head of the Department of Language, Linguistics, and Literature. I welcome you, Dr. Belgrave, to the panel.
Thank you.
Shernell Clark is a guidance counselor at the Darrell Jordan Secondary School and Vice President of the Barbados Association of Guidance Counselors. She has been a teacher for 23 years, having also worked at the Coleridge and Parry School and the Alexandra School. So welcome, Shernell.
Thank you.
Kim Davis Edwards believes in creating an inclusive and nurturing learning environment where every child can thrive. She is the principal and founder of Warren's Primary and Preschool, bringing over 25 years of experience in education and assessment methods for dyslexia and literacy. Her postgraduate research is exploring how best practices in education and leadership can improve education. And I believe, Mrs. Davis Edwards, your students are watching you. Welcome.
Thank you.
Ian Drakes. I don't think we need very much introduction for Mr. Drakes. Ian Drakes is the principal of the Samuel Jackman Prescott Institute of Technology, a long-standing educator, a champion of inclusive education and TechVault training. He's a visionary, he's a lifelong, and I would say life-wide learning. And there's a phrase which you usually use, Mr. Drakes. What is it? These are
exciting times.
These are exciting times. These are exciting times. So welcome, Mr. Drakes.
Thank you.
And Stephen Jackman is the current president of the Barbados Association of Principals of Primary Secondary Schools, BAPS. Under his astute leadership for several years, remediation and a focus on literacy have been his deep interests, and I can attest to that. Welcome, Stephen Jackman.
Good evening.
Great. As I said, there's an apology for the beauty rep who had an unfortunate incident, but we wish her well. Sharon Seeley is here with us, very well qualified principal. She's assigned to the St. Silas Primary School. She's a member of the Association of Public Primary School Principals, and she represents nursery, primary, and special needs. Welcome, welcome, principal. And that's our panelists and the format for today. I will pose 3 questions, one at a time to each educator, who will be allotted 3 minutes to respond. At the end of all the questions, hopefully we will provide an opportunity for persons to use the chat facility if time permits. But any additional queries, of course, because it's impossible to have the many persons who showed interest, it's impossible to have all of them with us in the studio, and sometimes the technology does not allow for the direct communication. So we have the chat facility, and we also have some members of the task force monitoring the chat. And if you have any queries or if you want to make any comments after, we have an email which is literacy246@mes.gov.bb. literacy246@mes.gov.bb. Sometime later, I hope that we can have that on the screen. So let us get started. Are you ready? Yes. Let us get started. And I'll start this way. In the 1950s, the UNESCO definition stated, a person is literate who can, and I want you to listen carefully, in the 1950s, a person is literate who can, with understanding, both read and write a short, simple statement on his or her everyday life. That's the 1950s. A person is literate who can, with understanding, both read and write a simple statement on his or her everyday life. So if we fast forward today, January 2024, UNESCO's definition is as follows. It says literacy is a continuum of learning. Literacy is a continuum of learning. Now, what do I mean by continuum? Literacy is an ongoing accumulation of the knowledge and skills, an ongoing accumulation and demonstration of skills and knowledge. And these are the skills and knowledge that we are expected to utilize throughout our educational career and beyond throughout our life. So the UNESCO definition 2024 states, literacy is a continuum of learning and proficiency in reading, writing, and using numbers throughout life, and is part of a larger set of skills which include digital skills, media literacy, information literacy, and all those skills necessary for sustainable development and global citizenship, as well as job-specific skills. A far cry from the 1950s. A person is literate who can both read and write a short, simple statement on his or her everyday life. And this renewed definition also speaks to the reading skills, as listening, speaking, reading, writing, and viewing is included. So it is with this definition in view that our panelists are responding to their questions. And again, I'm thanking the members of the task force who are taking notes. They're taking copious notes, and of course, as I said, the responses will inform our comprehensive report. So the panelists are ready, and I will pose the first question to Dr. Belgrave. The first question is, to what extent is literacy important to the success of learners within your context? And Dr. Belgrave's context is tertiary education, as she is the representative from the UWI. To what extent is literacy important to the success of learners within your context, Dr. Belgrave?
Thank you, Chair. I just want to start by saying that literacy is absolutely important in every context, especially at the tertiary level, because we are looking at education and performance that's based on written sources. So if you can't read, you can't access those sources. When I started university, we talked about reading for a degree, because there was so much reading involved, and reading beyond the level of just simple understanding of words, but being able to form inferences from what you've read, being able to critically analyze things and come up with your point of view. And so when students come to us, we are expecting a basic level of proficiency in the use of English, which is you should be able to use English at a basic level. But what are we calling this basic level, and what do we expect of them? When students come into UE, they have to do a test, and that is usually an English test, a test in terms of how much they know, how proficient they are in English. And based on that test, we assign them to various courses. But the ones who pass that test go into other courses that are supposed to develop their literacy even further. So you talked about literacy as a continuum, and we very much believe that, because they start out at a basic level and we add to that. So we teach them how to write at an academic level, in an academic setting, because writing in an academic setting is totally different from what you've been doing before in schools, etc. It's writing using sources and being able to cite those sources. We also have courses that build along, like we talked about digital literacy being a part of the whole group of literacies, because we talk about multi-literacies. So you have to learn to read and to write, but you also have to learn to write, say, for business. You have to learn to write for the professions. You have to learn to understand and write for the media. That's what we teach courses that teach them how to write for the media, how to analyze what's written in the media, how to be critical about what you consume, because a great part of being a literate person is being a critical consumer of information. We teach them public speaking skills, because RSC is an important part of literacy. So when they leave UE, we are hoping that they will be more literate than they were. But as you have seen from the definition, literacy is a lifelong thing. You keep learning and improving and adding to your literacy. So I would say that we expect our students who perform well at UE to have near native fluency in English. That means to be almost at the same level as somebody who learned English as their first language when they started out. I know first language is a term that needs to be explained. So when we talk about first language, it's the language that children learn first from their parents. There's no formal teaching of it. That's their first language. So Barbadians hardly ever, only about 5% of Barbadians learn English as the first language when they start to speak. Later on, through formal learning, they're exposed to English, and then they learn English to the point that they become fluent to a certain level. Because there is a theory that says that we can never acquire a language to native fluency, a learner. So I think that's something we have to take into account too. And if we're talking about using it for being literate in a language and using it for your everyday life, then you don't need to be like a native speaker to use it effectively. You just need a good enough grasp of it. So I will stop there. I think I've gone past my 3 minutes.
Well, thank you so much, Dr. Belgrave. But you have at UWI started to apply the various aspects of that new definition, so congratulations on that. And the other things that you've mentioned really spark another type of conversation, so thank you so much. I'm going to pose the same question to Chanel. To what extent is literacy important to the success of learners within your context? Chanel, and you are a guidance counselor.
Yes, please. I'm stationed, or I am assigned at the Darrell Jordan Secondary School. We have students, not all of them, but we have many students who will come to us with undiagnosed learning disabilities or learning difficulties. And so we have to get creative, teachers have to get creative in terms of planning and executing the lessons so that you can measure the success of the students in different ways. Because obviously you will appreciate that they are all at different levels. So you will have some that are coming in that are not even at the level of first form or an 11-year-old. You have some that are way below that standard, even only at level 3 and level 4, or sometimes below. So each child that comes into us at the first form, a diagnostic test is done for them to see what level they're at in terms of their literacy and their numeracy skills as well. So we have to make sure that we know where they're at, so that we can, for those persons who need it and will go through the learning support program, theirs is tailored for them, so that so that the teachers, the special needs teachers, will be able to assist them at their level or where they're at. And literacy is important for us then in terms of bringing our students up to the basic level of readiness to function in the world in which they live, so that things like learning how to recognize sight words, even learning how to recognize the letters of the alphabet sometimes is very important. That's what literacy is to us there in some cases. They're expected at some point of their time at school at our upper fifth level, where they're expected to sit the same exams as the students whom we would probably go to what we call a higher level school, and they're expected to sit the same CSET exam. So we have to bring them to that point, and I like that we have decided to give the students the opportunity to do the City and Guilds exams in math and English, where that might be a level that they might be able to attain. If students are not, some students are frustrated by the fact that they cannot get to a certain level. So if you can get them to that point of feeling confident within themselves and their abilities, then you will have students who take pride in their work. We have to get our children ready to fill out forms for a medical form, a job, a vacancy, driver's license, immigration form. Those basic things that some people take for granted at that level of adulthood, we have to get our children even up to that very basic standard of understanding how to fill out, even how to take medication, reading labels, those kinds of things. We have to work toward getting our children ready in that regard. And we talk about technology and incorporating technology, but if they do not even understand the basic instructions, then the technology will be lost on them, because probably they'll use it for the things such as taking the videos, but they wouldn't necessarily know how much further they can take themselves with the technology.
Yeah, that's an important point. And I'm glad you made that point, because although we're aiming to ensure that our students are digitally literate, information literate, and all those things, the foundational skills are essential, and that's where the diagnosis comes in. So thanks for those points. And I'm going to ask the same question of Mrs. Davis Edwards, a private school principal. To what extent is literacy important to the success of your learners within your context? What's the age range at your school?
3 years to 11.
Okay, 3 to 11.
But if I include, because Warmin's primary and preschool, so we are the only school with a model that takes children actually from 3 months
Wow.
to 11.
Okay, that's interesting to
11
know. That's a
years.
little marketing for you. But we will go right ahead.
But at Warmin's primary, literacy stands as I would say, the cornerstone of success, academic and personal success. And it is fundamental for all learning endeavors, enabling comprehension, critical thinking, effective communication, and access to knowledge. Beyond academics, literacy cultivates self-esteem and confidence. empowering students for lifelong learning and growth. And it is funny that the question was posed in this direction. So we started with the tertiary and then we ended up in the primary. So in order to have that progress aligned, we need to start at the basics, at the foundational stage. So in primary school, we must have this concept where age is not an issue. I find here in Barbados, sorry to say, age is an issue. We don't do this at this age. You have to wait till later. At Warren's Primary, we don't do that. We start very, very early. So once a child is able to recognize, let's say letter A, and that child is exposed to the sound, then the next thing is to embrace reading and to teach that. So to have an early reading program is important because children are emerging, right? For me, and some persons may not agree, but I do not think, I know our colleague here mentioned about it's the first language that we hear. For me, I don't think that dialect, I don't like to use the term dialect, because for me, dialect is difficult to read, and for me, and difficult to speak. I think we speak broken English. For children to understand how to read and how to spell and how to excel in that language, in that English, it needs to be taught and practiced and to be heard. So as a country, I really believe that we need to really focus in on standard English. Anybody can speak dialect, anybody can speak broken English. That is something that we swing in and out of if we know how to already speak standard English. And when we write, and children write, we usually write naturally in how we speak. So if a child is accustomed to hearing Agishidade, she will write that. So I think that we need to set boundaries when it comes to literacy, what is expected and what is practice, and build on that. So we need to have the right foundational skills, what is expected for students, for little ones, to build so that as they progress through secondary school, they take the right skills with them. And when they get to tertiary level now, they have the correct foundation on which to then build all the concepts and to communicate effectively.
Beautiful. And I will not even ask Cora to respond at this time. You sparked something when you talked about the dialect. Because it was this week we discussed that we need to have a conversation on the use of the dialect and standard English in all this. And we're looking at the definition and so on.
Please call it Bajan.
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 Oh, Bajan.
Okay,
Call it
Bajan, right.
Bajan. Call it Bajan. But you made a significant point because a person with low literacy skills, they may not have that self-esteem. So you brought in the affective domain there. They may not have that self-esteem and that confidence to even grow and develop. So that's a very good point, and I thank you for making that point. I will ask the same question. And remember, audience, we have 3 questions. This is the first one. We're coming to the end of the first question. We'll do it again. We have 3 questions this evening. To what extent is literacy important to the success of your learners? And Mr. Ian Drakes representing TVET. Mr. Drakes?
Yes, thank you. Interesting. I like this layout actually. You talk about coming to the primary, but in the context of technical vocational education, where I am now receiving the Darrell Jordan students, and I wanted to offer to them a lifelong skill in terms of a trade, and for us, our big challenge comes with students having what I would say blinkers on, and the challenge is that we come here for a trade. Why do we have to do communication skills? Why do we have to do these literacy things? Why are you drilling us into safety measures and writing reports? And so our challenge comes with when they don't have the foundation and not understanding that academic is tied to technical vocation education.
Yes.
And therefore, we now have to convince them. We have had this challenge, and I've come up with some innovative ways where we are doing some research to really help our young persons, because I have found that you have to be very careful not to shame them as well. And so what we have seen, and we just come out of an interesting program called Construction Gateway, which was about all trades. And our research has shown us that the lower literacy rate created some challenges for those persons in terms of the feedback that we've gotten from the industry. How they perform just ties to what you're speaking about in terms of emotional intelligence and actually socializing with others to understand that even if you have a trade, and I try to use the example sometimes, like, okay, someone gives you a check for $10,000 and you haven't an idea how to read. So you see enough knots and you go to the bank and the teller gives you $1,000 and you're all excited, but you are due $10,000. So we now have to assist them to help them to understand this is how it works if you want to be a businessman, if you want to sell your product. And we have found that we had a major challenge recently. We offer student stipend, and we saw a student having to look across to see his name in order to sign, because he don't know how his name is spelled. So he had to look across to see how his Christian name and surname is on the page to sign for his cash. At that age, and I'm saying that's what we call young adult. So when they arrive at me, and I wanted to add to what the guidance officer said, counselor, that they have to fill out application forms, and they know you have to drill them and coach them to fill even the application form to get into the SJPI. Where they just say, I'm only interested in the trade, but they're not understanding that hands-on is all about learning and the mathematics and the English. How you going to talk to a prospective client. I had an excellent presentation this morning from one of our ladies of the soil, Miss Thelma Pollard, who for 30 years did the makeup for all the artists for Phantom of the Opera. And our young ladies were taught in cosmetology some career skills, and some of them were so shy. So again, as you said, Dr. Henry, about the continuum, you can't be shy. And I remember the presenter said to them, but if you want to get a career, you want to get a job, you must be able to express yourself. You know, because she asked him, so what do you do on a day-to-day basis when you have to prepare for your class? And people say, oh, it's difficult. Well, she said, what does that mean? You can't sell that if you go to an interview. So again, expression of self. You know, and we're trying in this country, we want to produce more entrepreneurs. But you must be able to sell yourself to a client. And and for me, in terms of literacy, sometimes persons have a misconception even with the term self-employment. What self-employment? Sit down home and no client come to you and say, I want something done. Let me hear how self will be employed. You know, so
That would be unemployed.
and those are the young persons that come to us and say, but I want me a business. Yes, but you got to understand, you reading and writing and interacting with people and socializing to get the job and get it done well. And we know, we've heard all of our housewives and other persons complain. I say housewives because women are more aggressive in terms of getting what they want. Sometimes they can beat me up. But they get estimates for lumber that is way more than what they want, than what they need, because if we are failing at the tertiary level in terms of what we give them, because if I don't give them the whole package, then you all are going to suffer. In terms of you need 10 lengths of pine and the guy ordered 25. And it's at you, right? But I am saying that we have to get them, and that's what we've been trying at the SJPI in terms of the context of where it's very important to let them know that acquiring these skills. And you know, you talk about digital, you know, I'm talking about all the emerging industries, electric vehicles and coding and robotics, and I know we're all excited about it. But again, someone said to the point of being able to read and understand. You know, there was a big challenge in the pandemic when we closed and persons had to go online. These students were having a major challenge because really they learn better face to face, and therefore that interaction is needed. Plus, we are all social beings. But I will
Yes.
pause there.
Yes,
Madam Chair.
but thank you so much, and you will be delighted to hear that UNESCO has placed quite a bit of emphasis on technical and vocational within their new definition. There's a whole lot of information on that. So they heard you. They heard you. I will pose the same question to Stephen Jackman. To what extent is literacy important to the success of learners within your context? Secondary.
As a secondary school principal, I have a most unique perspective. I'm at my third school. I've been at the bottom, I've been in the middle. People think I'm at the top. I am seeing the same things over and over and over again, that there are a majority of students who are struggling with the ability to decode, interpret the symbols, find out what is being asked, and then take their thoughts and encode them in these symbols and put them down on paper. It is particularly hard for the Darrell Jordan type student, who we call a reluctant reader, who the language that he or she uses every day bears absolutely no relation to the symbol that we use to express that language. That child is going to struggle. And unfortunately, we have made a lot of ground with alternative assessments, but at the end of the day, the major assessment is still a pen, a piece of paper, and you have to write down on this piece of paper what you know. And it is frustrating when you know it and you cannot write it down on that piece of paper.
Wow. You left me almost speechless. But it is true. But we can't give up. And that's one of the reasons why we are here, because we want to make recommendations. And I gave you that definition from the 1950s. A person is literate who can write or read a statement, a simple statement on his or her life. That was the definition then. The definition now talks about all the digital, the informational literacy, and all those things. Are we, or have we moved our curriculum along? Have we moved it? Are we moving our curriculum along to make sure that our students are being prepared? Just as you're mentioning, so excellent points, excellent points. Sharon Seeley. Sharon, to what extent is literacy important to the success of learners within your context? And you are primary school?
Primary school.
Primary school.
Yes. For me, the importance of literacy is closely tied to the major goal. And the major goal is that our students and children are able to communicate, to listen, to interact with the world as a whole. And therefore, at the primary level, and I'm looking at also from nursery, we recognize that we have to make sure that our students start to master the skills that make them or equip them to be able to reach that level. It means then that at the nursery level, we have to expose them to listening skills, listening to respond to what is said, and to respond in a manner that makes sense. We have to teach them how to recognize the symbols that we are talking about, which sets the foundation for reading and for writing, for being able to critically analyze things like that. And therefore, when we look at our task of moving them from the basics or with the skills that they come from home with, and developing them and improving them and graduating them from one age group to another, where they then eventually are able to communicate at such a level that they are able to go into the secondary and eventually to the tertiary level, we recognize it is highly important. Right now, we have students in our primary system that travel, that go from one country to another, and they have to be able to fit in and to communicate with those persons that they are going to meet. And therefore, we have to be cognizant of the fact that when we are teaching them the formal language, for example, we use English in a formal manner, that they have to be able to learn how to code switch. Switch from Beijing, use the right word, Bajan, into using the formal language, especially if they go to English-speaking countries, because they have to be able to fit in, to be able to understand the nuances of language, and that is one of the challenges that many of our children have, and that we have to be able to try to at least encourage and help them to be able to take an interest in language in all its various contexts, to be able to communicate when they travel at the global level, here in Barbados at the national level, and even when we're looking at developing public speaking skills, that they be able to lost for words right now, but be able to present themselves in such a manner that they are able to be understood by the persons that are listening to them, and being able to answer questions competently, because we find that most of our children tend to be extremely shy, especially in those years, nursery up to class 4. They tend to be very shy when they have to come outside of their comfort zone, meet people, answer questions. They tend to limit their answers to one word. And these are things that we have to encourage them by developing their understanding of the language, that they can use it more competently.
Wonderful. And your success will determine the success of all those other persons who spoke before you. Great. So we're going to move right on. Thank you so much for your input. To the second question, remember I said we have 3 questions. And the second question, we'll take the same format. So we'll start with Dr. Belgrave. Within your context, so you represent tertiary. Within your context, what are some of the challenges you're experiencing based on the lack of literacy skills? And you touched on a bit of this before. Within your context, what are some of the challenges you're experiencing based on the lack of literacy skills? Or what are the successes you are experiencing based on desirable literacy skills? Challenges or successes?
Thank you. Before I answer that question, I need to respond to a couple of things that were said.
I knew it. You go right ahead.
No, seriously, because
Yes.
when you talk about students who are afraid and shy to speak,
Yes.
they're afraid to speak because they don't have proficiency in English.
Yes.
And you are not allowing them to speak in the variety that they have proficiency in.
Yes.
They can't write in the variety that they have proficiency in because we say it's hard to read. There is an established system that we could use to write Bajan. We just have to decide that's what we're going to teach. And we know that the skills, literacy skills, are transferable. It's a set of skills that you can transfer. You can learn to write in Bajan and transfer it to write in English. When you learned to write in English and you went and you learned Spanish, did you have to learn to write in Spanish all over again? No, you transferred the skills from English to Spanish. And to say that Bajan is broken English is wrong. It is not broken English. It has its own rules. You can tell if somebody's speaking Bajan wrong. I've had friends, I remember being at school with somebody who came from England to Barbados, and each time she would try to speak Bajan, we would laugh because the rules were, she didn't understand the rules, they were wrong. Bajan has rules, it has ways of doing things, it's an established language variety. But beyond that, you are telling 95% of the children who come to your school, keep quiet because you don't have anything to say because you can't say it in English. They want to know why you want them to learn English when they can conduct their business easily in Bajan. So we need to, you see, a lot of the research has shown that you can teach literacy in more than one language. The student can transfer, and they actually benefit from being biliterate. So that you can teach literacy in Bajan and literacy in English at the same time. What we have found, what the research has shown is that if the proficiency in your first language helps proficiency in a second language that you're learning. And the better you develop that first language, the better your proficiency in the second. So everything points to us using what the students come to us with. I understand if you come at 2 or 3 and you may not have a full language developed, by 5 students have their language, a full language. You can't ask them to deny what they know and who they are and then learn English, because this is what we are doing to them. They have no facility in English. They cannot speak English. They cannot understand it. But you are teaching the classes in English. And you are saying answer in English. And each time they start to answer, they become afraid, they stumble, they get corrected, and they stop talking. So they come to us at UE, and you have to beg them to respond to a question, because they just want to put on their heads and write notes. They don't want to engage in discussion about why they think something or how they would solve a problem, because they feel, well, I can't speak English, and if I get interrupted, I'm going to be ashamed in front of my friends, etc. We have to start, and this is part of what the definition for literacy includes. Inclusivity, understanding that you can embrace diversity in language varieties and still teach the skills. So that, sorry, I know I'm not answering your question, but what we have to decide is, do we want, what is it we are doing? Are we teaching literacy, or do we want to teach English?
Yes.
Which is it?
But you know, we've had these discussions, and I agree with you.
Yeah.
And that's why I said that we really need to have a separate conversation
Yes.
on this. And because it not only affects our children, our learners, but also our parents,
Yes.
who often don't come to meetings because they are embarrassed to speak. So I'm with you there. And could you kindly answer the question now?
Yeah, and sorry. I
Within
think
your
it's-
context, what
Yes.
are the challenges you are experiencing based on the lack of literacy skills? And you pretty much answered it.
But
though.
that was part of my.
Yes.
I was going to say that's part of the challenge
Yes.
we have. That students'
Yes.
first language is not the same as the language we use in the institution to teach with.
Yes.
The language of instruction. So we have the same hesitancy to speak, and also when we think of students coming to learn Spanish, right? We assume that we are going to teach them Spanish based on an English background. They don't have an English background. So where are they going to understand what you're saying in Spanish? They're going to Beijing. And they translate it from Beijing to English or from Beijing to French. If we ignore that, we're going to fail them, which is why we're failing at teaching English in the schools and why we have such low levels all the time, because we are ignoring the elephant in the room.
Yes.
And we have had to do that, especially at UE. We have that remedial course, but we've also set up a writing unit, or I call it a writing clinic, where students can come and get help, where you can work one-on-one with somebody, even if you don't have to be ashamed to say, I don't know how to do this, I can't get this done, I don't understand. But that's one of the problems we have, one of the challenges we have, and how we've set out to meet them. The other issue is with, sorry, there's an alarm. Sorry, I forgot I had that alarm. The other issue too is with, when we come to talk about, sorry, I lost my train of thought. You can move on and comment.
Okay, but the point that you made is an excellent point, because as I said at the beginning, we are analyzing quite a bit of data, and we have seen, the data have revealed that there is a lot of work to be done in the area of written expression. And the weakness is startling. So I agree with you there. And as I said, we will approach some principals and some schools, shortly, to discuss the findings and to offer some suggestions, intervention strategies and remedial strategies. But a lot of work has to be done in the area of written expression.
And we have to take into account the amount of writing that children are doing.
Yes.
They're
Yes.
writing a lot on social media.
Yes, but writing what? And writing how?
Yes.
But
no, writing is writing. Don't
yes,
get
but writing.
tired.
Okay, let's yes.
Writing is
Chanel.
writing.
Thank you. Another discussion. Chanel, to what extent, within your context, challenges that you're experiencing, and maybe some successes too, because they're not all challenges.
Okay, so when we're talking about the idea of literacy being a continuum, you would desire to have parents assist or to support in raising those literacy skills of the students. But sometimes the parents themselves, some of the parents themselves, lack the basic literacy skills. So right off the bat, you will not get the support that you would desire, the reinforcement that you would desire. So that's one of the issues that we will have at even many schools. I don't just narrow it down to a school like Darrell Jordan Secondary, but at many schools, that's the reality of it. We have persons with low literacy skills or challenges with with their intellect. That leads to children exhibiting undesirable behaviors, severe behavioral issues where children will do anything to detract from the fact that they have learning difficulties or low literacy skills. Some have low self-esteem because of the low literacy skills, and as I said before, that leads to a lack of pride in their work. And if you have someone who's confident in their literacy skills, as we're talking about speaking, the ability to stand up and speak or to express themselves, if they have higher literacy skills, they'll be more confident, or should be more confident in expressing themselves. We have some that are unwilling to accept help. Like I spoke about our learning support program, and that has seen its successes for those who do take up that opportunity to be part of the learning support program, where we have the special needs teachers. They get to take students from regular classes. Obviously they would have been identified before through the same diagnostic testing. So the special needs teachers will get to pull children from regular classes to work with them outside of just being sitting in the class with everybody else. So you do have that success, in my opinion. Those special needs teachers work really hard in terms of trying to formulate specialized programming for those children. They work during lunch times as well, in terms of trying to provide the children with the opportunities that they need to better themselves. I give an example where we had a girl who was, she couldn't recognize even the letters of the alphabet, and it was not just an English teacher approach or a math teacher approach, but the teachers in the various subjects recognized this, and they all pushed to get her to the level where she needed to be, and she has advanced from first form and beyond, and I think she's doing a lot better than she did before. We have some that have literacy or intellectual issues. They cannot they're unable to have those basic critical thinking skills, as Mr. Jackman was talking about. Many of us, we mentioned before, you cannot deduce, you cannot make inferences and those kinds of things. So those are some challenges that we face in our particular context. Even if you're not able to understand, or if you're not able to comprehend or put a sentence together, that affects numeracy, of course, especially when it comes to word problems, where math and English mix up, and that's a problem for most people in the first place. But yes, that literacy skills, lack of literacy will affect basically everything about an individual, and those are things that we have to pay attention to in terms of assisting the children to get to the point where they're able to come up to the mark, so to speak, to the level that they should be at, the chronological age level, and maybe beyond.
Well, thanks for not giving up. Thank you. What about successes at your school?
Well, I am here trying hard not to respond about the Bajan and the English, standard English. So before I answer, I just want to say, when we speak about children and having low self-esteem and lack the confidence to come up and speak in front of an audience, and then at tertiary level we see that stems from small, from little children, primary age. If children are not given the opportunity from early to come before an audience, whether it be in their intimate class, and have that opportunity to express themselves, they will struggle later on unless that is curbed. So let me answer my question. So I will answer the question in two ways: the successes that I see, that we experience, and then the challenge. So at our school, our students demonstrate robust literacy skills, and the majority of times they would perform across all subjects. We give them the opportunity to come before a class. I'm going to give you just an example. Okay, essay writing. We're speaking about literacy and writing and reading. So when children compose their essays, before we correct them, they go in front of the class and read their essay. Right? And who assesses that essay? Their peers. So those children in the class are critiquing the essay that is being read. What that does is to strengthen their skills in how they need to order their thoughts, the introduction, the body, and end with the conclusion. And you will hear children in class 1, class 4 saying, but your introduction was not vivid, it didn't catch my attention, and your body was not correct, and I didn't like how you conclude. It was not concluded accurately. If we do not give children the opportunity to build confidence at a young level, they cannot do it as an adult. And to respond to persons not wanting to say they don't understand, I think that's a personal thing. People generally don't want others to know they don't understand something or they have a challenge, so they will keep that private to themselves. The challenge that I will say that we experience at our school, I would say, is as a result of COVID. So post-COVID, we have found that, or we have seen a decline in vocabulary richness. And possibly it is due to screen time. That increase in screen time, because at that time everybody was on a device, everybody had a device. Who didn't have a device had to go and purchase a device. And even today you will see children still with devices. Nobody has the interest now of taking up a book and read. So to address that situation, we had to introduce what we called our daily drop and read sessions, which last for 15 minutes each, and we did that on a daily basis. And that was to help to, let's say, counteract the effects of that prolonged screen time, and also to reignite students' passion for reading and enhancing their vocabulary. It's still a work in progress, however. So I know we're speaking about the digital literacy, and everybody needs to be online, but I think that still needs to be for the young ones to be managed.
Yes.
Another area that we have observed is the linking, for some students, not all. There are some children who are able to read extremely well, but then the spelling is off, you know, or they're exposed to one concept but thinks it belongs here and not the other place. So I think while we may speak about literacy and how we need to develop it, I really think that we must place that emphasis in the primary school and make sure that it is really built on a solid foundation.
Yes, and we must emphasize the teaching of the discrete literacy skills. When I was going to school, how many ever moons, years ago that was, I remember reading was going home and learning and rehearsing and all that, this passage, and coming back and standing before the teacher and reading it, and then maybe answering one or two questions. But we had to remember that we have to teach those discrete skills: listening, speaking, reading, writing, and now viewing has been included.
Yeah.
Right? That's important. And Mr. Drakes,
Thank you.
any successes?
Yes, actually, I'm glad you said that because I had always intended to only talk about successes.
Great.
And I want to start with the pandemic and say that in 2022, ILO came out early, and this is just to help my colleague here. It's not about online. If you go online, the vulnerable group will be more vulnerable. They don't have access, and they will never have access.
Yes.
So we in technical vocation education understand, and that's why viewing is important. And therefore, that's the success of how we did it at technical vocation education level. Never really online as everything. Whenever I will say to you that whenever there was a break, in terms of when the Prime Minister or whoever said, well, we open, we brought the students back every single time back into the classroom. We were very strategic, and we sent students on job attachment during the pandemic. The success is that with the persons that may be getting it in terms of literacy, they are self-motivated, and they have the opportunity, and they try new dimensions. They become risk takers in getting involved in businesses. Those are the ones that become entrepreneurs. And we have seen, and even for us, we have seen success in terms of our students. From my business studies a year ago, we were invited to be part of CDB and speaking to the Prime Ministers of the Caribbean. And out of that, my student was offered job attachment at CDB.
Yes.
Right? So again, the other success is my students go all the way to, you call it Russia, China, world scales competitions. And I highly recognize. I have a student who now works with Michael Kors over 5 years as one of the fashion designers. This is the kind of success. They strive for greater recognition and excellence as well. Because they may said, I have said earlier, they come for trade. But they realize, you know what is next? Because we push to say to them, what is next is not walking across the stage and receiving a nice certificate. That's not what is next is at SJPI. What is next is, do you want to pursue further studies? Do you want to be, as I try to more working for yourself, and I have a dream, and I say to these new students all the time, I have, and I'm looking forward to the day that you all are on the pages of Fortune 500. I have no problem if one of you are making 10,000 or 10 times or 1,000 times as much money as me. I actually will be happy. So those are the kind of visions that I infuse in them. And I'm seeing the development of it in terms of some students who are really taking at the challenge. And so that's the success that we've been seeing with some who have been able to hold their own. Quite recently, I believe UE and BCC were part of the collaboration between the two UK and Canada in terms of embassy and being a diplomat for a day. And one of them was an SJPI male student.
Wow.
On International Women's Day. Yes. So that's, yes. So That's the kind of success that we are seeing.
And that is what it is all about. Wonderful. Thank you so much, Mr. Chapman. Your successes?
Well, the funny thing is that the challenge that I mentioned earlier
Yes.
has been in one of the schools I worked in the genesis of the success. Having reluctant readers who just couldn't, wouldn't, didn't read. And it was frustrating for them because some of them could come and sit down with you and explain the concept to you perfectly in the language that they use every day. But they could not go back and sit down and write that on a piece of paper. And very often it wasn't because they were foolish, it was because of some undiagnosed learning problem. I'm seeing that in other schools too, where highly intelligent children are having great difficulty performing at the level that is expected because there is something undiagnosed in the background. But where I was at the time, this was the success. The special needs and reading specialist was able to take those children where they were and using the process writing approach, start them telling their stories, and they started them in the language that they knew, and they moved them to the language that they wanted. And it went from other people coming and seeing them and saying the Dunksy to the journals that they wrote being used as the reading material to start the other ones coming into the program.
Yes.
Right? And that is how we did it. Unfortunately, by the time she got it working well, it was time for her to retire, and other people didn't take it up.
No, dear. That usually happens. That usually happens.
But that was a major success to see them writing and being happy to write and having this journal. And we use the school's printing facilities, the colored ink and the laminated paper and all of that to put together these wonderful journals that they could walk with and say, look, I wrote this. We wrote this.
Yes, that's important, and it works well too when students are involved in portfolio development.
Yes.
I'm very happy to hear that the ministry is implementing a project-based approach, so it becomes real. It's experiential, and it becomes real. So I hope somebody takes up that again, and your successes.
Well, before I start on the successes,
Yes.
I am going to address some of the challenges that we find at the primary level.
Okay.
Because of the age group I'm looking at nursery from 3 plus and special needs up to 18 plus. So along that continuum, you have a variety of challenges that in order for students to get the success that we're talking about, you have to first address. So you start with what I would call the new phenomena, where children are reluctant to write. Children hate writing. You're finding that group is growing, where children refuse to write. The difficulty that they are having now in learning the letters and learning numbers, that I'm finding is growing among the primary levels. And then you are having those that are impacted by background, by environment, which makes it challenging. And I must respond to Dr. Berghoff in the fact that because we understand that our children come from varying backgrounds, we do not insist that they have to use the English language. We try to teach them it and encourage them to use it. But in order to help the child express itself from as early as infants, nursery, you have to let them use what they know. But we're recognizing that the vocabulary is very, very limited, which makes it difficult for them to express themselves, even with prompting. And yes, we do give them the opportunity to stand up in front of their colleagues and to speak. What I am finding, and I believe my other colleagues are finding, is that with maturity and the development of self-esteem, our children are better able to meet those challenges that we are seeing. In addition to that, we're finding children are, because of technology, are using the abbreviated letters to express themselves, and this is creeping into the essays especially. that you're trying to get them to use the correct word, but it is becoming difficult. And then understanding basic concepts, what we would call early childhood concepts, between, beside, next to, in front of. You are finding that, and we are finding that more and more children are having challenges understanding these basic concepts, which in turn impacts their understanding of what directions you give them to do things and to find things. So you have to not only point, but actually get up and go and say, it's here, look, this is under that. So you're finding that their use of language is very, very limited. And it is becoming challenging because teachers do have concerns about it, in helping them develop that vocabulary is one of the greatest challenges that we have. And then to get them to express themselves. And we know that on the whole, that Barbadians are not very expressive generally. So you say, how are you today? I'm good. Oh, good. One word. You have to try. You're working at getting them away from the one sentence responses. One word responses, to help them develop that ability to converse, to carry on a conversation that lasts. And then part of it is that sometimes the things that we are teaching them are not in their interest. So therefore you are struggling. Yes, it's in the curriculum, it's there for you to teach them, but they're not interested in it. And some of them will tell you, I am not interested in it. So those are some of the challenges that we encounter on a daily, the cold, getting cold, on a daily basis that impact our children and impact their ability to assimilate the information that we are giving them. But we do have successes, and we celebrate their successes. So when you have a child that is having problems with getting up to speak, and you finally get that child to be able to stand up in front of the class or stand up in front of assembly and say something, that is a success. Now, that child might not be as good at it as another child that is very fluent in the language, that has that that background that will enhance that. But just seeing those incremental steps are successes that we celebrate with our students. When you have children, and we're getting more children like this in the system that are nonverbal, and you finally can get them to talk, to expand sentences, those are successes. They might not get 100% or in anything, but that you brought them from nonverbal, that they can communicate something to you that you can understand. Or you could get their speech, because some of them have garbled speech, and you get them to the sense where they can speak to you that you could understand what they're saying. These are all, these are the successes that we celebrate. When you can get a child that from nursery, reception, infants A, infants B, class 1, is struggling to recognize letters and to write them. And because of the work we are doing or trying to do with them, that they eventually are able to learn alphabet, that is a success. So our successes are not always the big, broad ones that we celebrate. Not that we don't have them. We do have them. But when we're looking at those that are struggling and seeing the minor steps that they're making, those are what we also consider successes within our context.
Wonderful. And what does that saying? It says all teachers are superheroes.
Yeah.
Just from listening to you, and you mentioned the learners and so on, and the struggling and the shy and all those. But I mean, when we even, it's not for this discussion now, but if we break it down into boys, what we're seeing among the boys, and then what we're seeing among the girls, I mean, that's a whole evening's discussion alone. So I really believe that saying all our teachers are superheroes, and I commend all the teachers out there who have not given up, who don't plan to give up on our boys and our students with special requirements and so on. And at this time, I'm going to ask the third and final question. The third and final question. Thank you so much for your answers so far. And we're getting some response from the chat. The third question: based on the new UNESCO definition of literacy, what recommendations can you give to stakeholders, to policymakers, to the task force for the improvement of literacy education in Barbados? Do you want me to read that definition again, or
Yeah.
No.
you have it?
Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah.
great. So based on that new definition, what recommendations can you give? What changes would you want to see in education, in policy, and so on? Dr. Belgrave?
Thank you. Oh, policy. I think in terms of policy, we need a policy, a language policy in Barbados. Because when you look in the actual documents that are given for teachers, there's nothing, not a clue that there are students who don't speak English as their first language. That isn't there. It doesn't appear. So there's nothing to deal with it, to say to the teacher, this is how you approach it, this is what you do. So you need that first. Sorry, I didn't have that as my first point. But
So where should that originate, that language policy?
it
from?
is usually from consensus with teachers, educators get together and develop with the ministry, because the ministry is who issues the language policy, you know. But through consultation, and
Okay.
throughout the OECS, we worked on a project that developed a language policy for 8 OECS countries. And sad to say, it gone past me. So next thing, what I think in terms of what you asked, in terms of recommendations, the first thing I would recommend is that we broaden our concept of literacy. If I look at this, we need to broaden our concept of literacy. What we have had is a narrow traditional view of literacy in which the schools focus on literacy in English,
Yes.
and they're dismissive or ignorant of all the student experiences in literacy in minority languages or minority varieties. We ignore that when it is a rich base that we can build on and use. The next thing I think we need to do
Before
is
you go on, there may be some persons in the chat that we're monitoring who may they be asking, so what do you mean by that? Could you break that down a little bit for us, please?
by which part?
The
oh,
minority, yes.
the minority languages or varieties, like
yes.
Bayesian is what I mean in terms of a minority. Minority not in terms of speakers, but in terms of status. Yeah, because most Bayesians speak English. Most Barbadians speak Bayesian, but Bayesian doesn't have a high status even among those who speak it as the only variety they function in properly. The other thing with Barbados is that most Bayesians think that they know English. So you cannot teach them English like you teach in Spanish as a foreign language, because there is a part of English that they know, and there is a part of English that they do not know, and then there's a part that they know passively. So they can listen to a radio broadcast in English and understand because they have passive knowledge of English, but they can't produce, right? They can't produce that. So if you look at what we're trying to teach in terms of English, there's some things that they know, some they need to learn, and some they only know passively. And Dennis Craig talked about that a lot in the 80s, 90s. Yeah. So that's my first thing, to broaden our concept of literacy and to be more inclusive, to embrace cultural and linguistic diversity. And like I said before, that we can do that because literacy skills are transferable. And following on from that, we should use the proficiency that the child brings in the first language to build proficiency in the second language. An important part of this is to raise awareness of the varieties that the students function in, the codes that they understand. They know that you tell them, all right, you say it in Bayesian, I'll say it in English, but you have to cause them to examine the two varieties and understand the differences. Not one is not correct and the next one incorrect. They're appropriate for particular contexts and varieties, and you function in two varieties and you select the appropriate one, not the correct one, right? The appropriate one. There's no correctness in terms of language, but it's wrong and right. That's one thing we have to understand, and therefore don't tell children to speak properly or speak correctly, or say, all right, you said that in Bayesian, can you say it in English?
So should our teachers be teaching in Bayesian?
Sometimes,
All the teachers know Bajan.
sometimes you have to.
That you need to, you see, that's the other thing. If you're teaching literacy, and you want me to come and session.
That's another conversation. We talked about that this week.
Session, right?
That's another conversation
But
which we will have.
seriously, they need facility in the languages that they're
Yes.
teaching. They need good facility in English if you're going to teach English too.
Yes.
That's the other thing.
Yes.
Yeah, so, all right. So my other point would be separate conversational proficiency from academic proficiency. Because research has shown that we can teach conversational proficiency if we have the interaction and the information, and we can teach, children can acquire that in like 2 years. Whereas it takes like 5 years to get academic proficiency. So we know we're dealing with two separate things. If you think of English itself, standard English, there are two varieties. There's a standard conversational variety, which we call colloquial English. And then there's standard written variety. What we tend to focus on is the written variety. But there are two varieties that they should be functioning in. So that when a child gets up to make a speech, he doesn't sound like a textbook talking. He talks like colloquial, like an English person would when they're speaking, you know. So you use the colloquial variety. I don't know if well, those who have been in my classes, I'm sure, have seen me on the line things and write colloquial, not in written English, because there are two standards. There's a spoken standard and a written standard. We need to make students aware of that. We need to make them aware of the skills that they have that they can transfer into learning the language they are learning, so that they don't feel that they are inadequate, that they understand they come to us with skills, with knowledge, with information. You know, they're not empty slates when they come. They bring a whole wealth of information and skills that they've learned in the 2, 3, 4 years that they've been alive.
So you're basically saying that we had some work to do, because our teachers, we can't take it for granted that the teachers know all these things. So you
No,
can't
that we can't.
apply
But
what you don't know.
They need to make linguistics a required course for
Okay.
teachers.
Thank you for your marketing, Cora.
No, not
But
my
it is
teacher.
true. But it is true. But it is true. I agree with you. Chanel, thank you so much. Very important points. Chanel, guidance counselor. Based on the UNESCO definition, what recommendations would you give us?
We've spoken here today about a variety of literacies. We have multiple intelligences, and therefore we have to recognize that children, people in general, learn in different ways. We touched briefly on the background, the environment of our learners, and that is very important. When we are talking about the type of background that some children come from, some environments are prohibited, and they will undo pretty much a lot of what we try to do at school. If we're talking about recommendations, there must be, for some parents who lack in those literacy skills, we should look at programs that can help the parents in their challenges that they might be having. We also have to have early diagnosis of learning difficulties or learning disabilities, so that they can be addressed from early. And I heard mentioned in the new approach that's being taken towards education in Barbados about the specialized teachers in the primary school.
Okay.
In terms of, you have the teachers who, well, one reason why they're not going to teaching in primary school was because math, I do not do math very well. Not that I fail it, but math frustrates me. So I would not want to inflict my kind of frustration on anybody's child at primary school, because I believe that at that basic level, at that foundational level, that you have to have the best persons, and like Dr. Belgrave's mentioned in terms of that linguistics course, that's key. I think that at that foundational level is where you need to have the best persons who are going to be teaching the foundations for our
Agreed.
children. Because when you mess up that foundation, the house is going to crumble. And I think that we need to get serious about literacy in that regard, making sure that the foundation or the foundations are properly laid for our children. If they're not laid properly, they will have that ripple effect in terms of having problems later on in life. We have to have community involvement. Maybe you have volunteers come into these schools, primary or secondary, and they say, and they just read with the children. That could go a long way in terms of showing the children that reading or understanding, comprehending is important even for an adult. My colleague here, she mentioned about the reading every day, and one of my colleagues, I got that from her, the dare, drop everything and read in schools, and that is something that we could look at implementing as well. Technology should be used as an enhancement tool rather than a replacement. I mentioned earlier about children, our children nowadays, from very little, they know how to use technology better than some of us do. So in terms of, I mean, we always talk about screen time, and sometimes we tell the children, put down the tablet and go and read a book or whatever. But what about incorporating the technology to teach them those literacy skills? To you have the tablet in front of you, don't just use it for watching TV shows, but use it for learning.
Right.
Marry the two, because if we don't, they'll not make the connection between using the technology for learning and being more literate in certain regards. How to send emails. Some children, they will send you an email and they write everything in the subject line. They don't understand that you have to go below the subject line to compose your email. So those things we have to teach the children how to incorporate the technology in their literacy skills when we're talking about digital literacy and so on.
And if I may interject here, though, because I can hear Professor Landis's voice in my head right now saying information literacy, Sylvia.
Yes.
Because what you mentioned about the use of the technology is fantastic. But we have to ensure that they are information literate,
Yes.
and they can recognize fake news
That's it.
from the facts, the
Yes.
fact from fiction,
Yes.
incredible, so that is important. And no matter the age,
Yes.
it's not when they get 16 or whatever, let's introduce information literacy,
It's true.
because they're using the devices from very, very young.
It's true. I
Yes.
wanted to say that something that Mr. Drakes mentioned about the children not really understanding the importance of marrying the whole literacy and skills. Maybe a suggestion was that SJPA and BVTV can come in and assist us in pushing that connection between literacy and trade skills, those kinds of things. Because when we say things to them, they do not understand, right?
Yes.
So hearing it from the horse's mouth, so to
Yes.
speak,
Yes.
may compel them to understand you still have to marry the literacy in terms of understanding language and counting and so on, and your skill that you have.
So maybe some bridging programs.
Yes.
Some bridging
Definitely.
programs. And if I know Mr. Drake, he's already conceptualizing
Yes.
as you speak. Okay, Kim.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Excellent suggestions.
For me to elevate literacy education in Barbados, the stakeholders and the policymakers need to, I would say, should recognize the importance of a early childhood literacy program. I think that is must. If you're going to be starting from the foundation, continuous teacher training is important because children are in school with teachers who may not know how to teach reading, because reading is a skill that needs to be taught. There needs to be equitable access to resources. So for all, and you're not going to include for private schools as well,
Private, of course.
you know, because we also have the nation's children.
Yes.
Resources, the devices, hands-on materials, because most persons think that reading is just hearing a letter sound, but children need to manipulate. They need to have materials, need to blend and segment, playing with sound, so like phonological awareness activities and phonemic awareness, those things need to come out. So it is not only about just picking up a book, but before we can get there, we need to have all of these different activities and make it fun. So once it is fun, children will want to read. Persons usually will use go and read as a punishment. And that's why children then, I don't want to read because they're being punished. Instead of saying, well, it's reading time and make it fun. I read with you, and and that's how you get children excited about books. Additionally, there needs to be literacy assessments for targeted interventions. We cannot assist children who struggle, who have underlying issues, and don't have an intervention for it. So having the ILPs specifically for an individual to assist them, what their challenges are, how we're going to get those met, how we can get them over the hurdle. We also need to understand that parents need to be involved. Parents think that it's just the teacher. Reading is something to, especially if a child struggles, it cannot be fixed in a day. It takes time. And one of the things that persons tend to neglect is reading practice. You need to practice in order to build fluency. And then you need to have that fluency assessment. So you need to have your running records and then test the children's understanding, their comprehension of what they have read. Because there are persons who read, adults do it, they read and do not understand one thing on the paper. They call the words well, yes, but they just do not understand. And then to foster community engagement, we need to have initiatives, those community engagement initiatives, and you had mentioned that, where we can have discussions on why children will struggle, why, or even to get parents and families involved in the whole learning process, because adults struggle as well. I remember way back when I did some sessions with reading, I had, and this is before Warriors was a primary school, I sent some students into primary school knowing how to read. And the school was so impressed that they asked for me to give some assistance. And I sent a flyer advertising the whole program. And I remember this grandmother called and said, yes, I called about the boat cruise. I said, the boat cruise, ma'am? She said, yes, the boat cruise. I said, I did not send a flyer about boat cruise. Yes, and she called me and then, ain't about boat cruise? I said, no, ma'am. So I said to her, so then in my mind, I'm like, okay, something is wrong here. I said, what does this flyer look like? She said, it is a fluorescent green covered like flyer. I said, okay, that's the flyer that was sent, but it's not about a boat cruise. So I took her information. I said, well, you go back to school and find out about this boat cruise, because I'm not the person running a boat cruise. So I'd asked one of the parents of the students at my Hindu primary school, your school having a boat cruise for a fundraiser? I said, yes. I said, oh, so a flyer did go. She said, yes. She said, but 2 flyers came home in her child's bag. One about the reading assistance and about the book cruise. So you know what I said? The grandmom cannot read. The lady called back about 2 to 3 days later and said, oh, ma'am, I now understand which flyer is yours. And so I want some assistance for my grandchildren. And I wanted to say, you can come too. So here it is. These children are with an adult who also struggles. So we need to engage and have workshops and intervention also for the parents and guardians of children. So I think that that's important. And once we do all of these things, then we can bolster literacy development.
Wonderful. And what makes me feel very satisfied too is that when I read the proposals with respect to the transformation, the educational transformation, a lot of these things are embedded in the transformation. So they're good, as Mr. Drakes would say. What would you say?
Exciting times.
Exciting times ahead. Exciting times ahead. Go ahead, Mr. Drakes.
Yes, actually, you use a term there that I have deliberately been using and not using the term that we love to use, the term remedial. I have been using the term bridging programs. Yes, and I've been putting that in my estimates.
Yes.
Because one of my recommendations is that, yes, you may be fixing it down there. I have them right now. Again, what is next? So I have been putting in where I believe that, and I have been talking to specialists to get some advice on how you go about it in terms of testing the students I have now, giving them an extra semester. Because as you said, you can't fix this overnight. But I can't send them out there all the time, to me, in good faith. So my recommendation is to have a bridging program for,
Yes.
and I said, math, English, and science.
Yes.
So you want you understand, literacy is tiny, I am tiny in everything.
Yes.
And I'm asking so I can now employ specialists and have it done in a quiet way, because you don't want to shame young adults. And that's why the term bridging program
Yes.
is what I've been pushing at the tertiary level.
Yes.
And I agree with you that we need to have that collaboration, because one of my middle names is collaboration. So I like that, and therefore that's one of my strong recommendations that I had on this aspect in terms of what we can do at the tertiary level right now. In other words, you can't say, oh, well, when the next set come along, no. I got to work on who I have. And they're arriving all the time as we speak. Come August 26th, they'll be arriving again. And so are we going to just have talk shops? No. So I've been looking at that, Dr. Henry, in a strong way.
Yes.
I'm putting it on paper
Yes.
to argue for it.
Yeah, we've discussed that at UWI as well.
Yeah. So that's it. And my other thing would have been, a lot was said, so I don't want to rehash.
Yes.
But providing the enabling environment that would allow us to address the new definition
Yes.
in a meaningful way, and as you said, let the students understand it's a way to have fun.
Yes. You're on the right track. And the breadth of the education reform policies will embrace all that. Mr. Chapman?
Well, I'm going to start where Mrs. David Edwards was. The creation of individual policies, individual plans to pick up the student where they are.
You mean the IEPs?
Yes.
Okay.
So that we can move them forward. It means though, and anybody who has been in this ministry, when I do estimates, they'll recognize what I'm about to say. It means more resources, more money, more tools.
Yes.
Right? And it also does not mean giving me more and giving my friends in primary less. If you're giving me 5, give them 10.
Here.
Okay.
Because the more work they do, the less work I have to
That's
do.
correct.
Yes. Yes, that's true. Because somebody here in the chat is saying they agree with you. We need to redesign our curriculum. They're talking about resources to facilitate literacy development in the early years and retrain the minds of teachers.
Yes.
The other thing is to remember that persons with literacy problems are on a continuum. It isn't that they don't want to learn, it isn't that there's something stopping them. Whether it is the background that they've come from, whether it is the environment it is, whether it is a learning difficulty, they're on a continuum. And our job, Sherna has heard me say this over and over again, is to provide the scaffolding so that when they are ready, they can move. And we need to resist the urge to cure the person at that point in time.
Correct.
Because if we approach it as a cure,
Yes.
we can kill the patient.
Yes.
Right? And the final one that everybody has mentioned it, those who can, make sure that we have the appropriate digital tools for them to use.
Yes. And we would not even speak of the AI and the impact of AI on I mean, all those are for discussions
Trust
in the
me, I
future.
expect they're dealing with that.
The
I was
AI.
actually shown today how to
Yes.
make a chatbot.
Yes. The impact of AI on literacy. Your
When I'm
recommendations?
looking at the recommendations, remember I'm looking at the span from 3 years right up, and I'm concentrating mainly on our weaker students. So because we have to start our process from where the children are, it means that we're going to need all the different types of materials possible to help these children. And I'm not speaking at a whole school level. I'm speaking at a class by class level. For example, you are going to need the reading rods. You are going to need the flashcard alphabet cards. You are going to need the flashcard for words, the Dosh list and the phrase list. These are just some of the basic things that you are going to need to start our children on the road to success. We would definitely need dedicated areas in the primary schools because you have to pull out those students that are struggling. And in order to help them fall in love with this whole aspect of literacy, you need to have a room, just like they tell us that we must have rich print classrooms. You need areas within a school or area within a school that is filled with rich print to help the children. I remember at primary school, not here, going to a reading room that had the alphabet chart, that had the number chart, that had the flashcard, that had the books that started without pictures. And I recognize that we don't have them here, so that the children start reading pictures first. And then it progressed to the one-line books, and it progressed from there, so that students that were struggling felt a sense of success. So we need to look at these things. We definitely need, and I've talked to enough colleagues to know that we definitely do need a national reader. Whenever it comes to this time of the year, principals and teachers are asking, what kind of reader you're using in your school? What kind of reader we need one, and it's time that we get one. We've been struggling with this aspect for long enough that we need to really look at a national reader so that if a child comes from one school to another, we're using the same book. You know, that it's not having to go to purchase new books and start afresh, which is frustrating for a child that is struggling.
What did we use when we were going to school? Cora, can you remember? Was it the Royal Reader?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So that's what you're talking about?
Yes, and that went all over the island.
Okay.
We also need to, and I heard one of my colleagues talk about it, we train our educators. Part of the challenge is the uncertainty that teachers have when it comes to especially early childhood and the skills that have to be taught at that age to make our children successful, especially our struggling readers. There is some retraining that needs to be done, and we need to look at that. In addition to that, we have, because we're doing integration, we have children with challenges within our schools. And therefore, in some instances, we need personnel to come in and assist. Parents are working, so even when you ask a parent to come in to assist, they are unavailable. So we do need personnel to come in to assist our children, to help them. How it's going to be done, that is what I cannot speak to. But it is something that we need to look at, especially if we're looking at getting our children involved in the whole global economy. then we have to look at all of these things to make that success start from nursery, early childhood, into the primary level, going on into the secondary level, which seeks to eliminate a lot of the challenges that we have now. There's one that you mentioned earlier, which is re-looking at the curriculum. Talking with teachers, many of them, especially those that have not been in the system that long, struggle with understanding the whole curriculum guide, especially for early childhood, and wanting to know, where do I start and where do I end? Where does this age group start and where does it end? It needs to be much clearer than it is right now, so that people can gain that confidence to be able to do the tasks that they are given much better than we're doing it right now.
One question I want to ask you before you conclude, though. You mentioned about assistance with those children in the schools. Is this above and beyond the teaching assistants that are already there? So is it a different type of assistance?
You have children that struggle with, for example, you have children that struggle with autism. They are autistic. Some are nonverbal, some do not write, but they understand what is done. We have some that we test, and you have to test them verbally, but you have to wait until they are ready to supply the answer to be able to write down something, which makes the testing process really long. In terms of writing information in books, they need the help. For example, we have some that are able to give you all the information, surprisingly can read, but you have to wait. So in the classroom itself, in the classroom setting where you're having the regular children, and when I'm talking about the regular children, those that get it as you're teaching it, then you have the strugglers, and then you have children with special needs. You know, we have a little boy who struggles with writing because the hand goes, he can't keep it quiet. So you need some person, especially when you have like 20-something of them in a class, it makes it difficult for a teacher to be able to work with this child at the same pace as you're working with the rest. So we do need personnel coming into the classrooms.
Yeah, I understand. There's a comment here: in schools we are teaching for exams and tests instead of allowing our students to speak in early childhood. We keep interrupting their speech and their flow of thoughts, leading to frustrations and a shutdown of their mentality. That's just right. Reading what the person in the chat facility is saying. But I do take your point that there are students who need that extra.
Yes, they do.
And in some cases, the teacher can't provide all that because the teacher is still teaching and focusing on so many others. So I've made the point. Thank you for that recommendation. But I will also reiterate that from perusing the proposal for the educational transformation, many of these things have been thought through already. So I'm very happy about that we're going in the right direction. And well, we're coming to the end. It has been quite an enlightening evening with you sharing your perceptions and sharing your thoughts and sharing your suggestions and so on. I'm going to, as I make the concluding statements, let me see though if there's anything else here on the chat that we can share. It's quite a bit here. A good idea would be to have a free national reading course which goes from basics to mastery, or at least being proficient. For example, ABC up to proficiency reading and reading the newspaper, and this should be free to everybody. What do you think about that? A national reading course. So the chat, and I really want to thank those in the chat. This is a really long one. Students limit their reading to what they need to access on their technology devices. They seem to be versed in knowledge they acquired via YouTube and TikTok and video, and which is far removed from what is the norm in the classroom. And we've talked about that because we see the essays with the letter U instead of the YOU and so on. So it's a hard road we have to travel, but as teachers, as educators, we can't give up. We can't give up. I'm going to ask you to just say one word, and then I'm just going to close the session.
One word?
One word.
I have 2 words.
Okay, your final word then. Your final words.
Just 2 things that what I don't know if this is beyond the remit of your committee, of your task force, but I really think we need to do a study on literacy in Barbados. We need to know what the literacy rate really is. The last time they said 99%. That was when Adam was alive.
That was when the definition. Remember I told you the definition at
but
the
you only
beginning.
had to recognize the name.
Right.
Yeah.
Or
But
Bible
I think
verse
we
or
need-
something.
We need a study. It will need funding, etc. But we need a proper study, literacy study, so that we can get people to awake and understand that they need to become literate, that they're not literate.
But
If you can't fill out a form, and
right.
if you don't know what is on a form, what it actually means, then you're not literate.
Well,
So
what
we
I
need
will
work
say
on
to
that.
you, all of us are illiterate within context. All of us. Before we look down on that person who could not read or write or maybe fill the form in the bank and so on, but all of us have some measure of illiteracy when we look at the definition. So
you're always becoming more literate.
we're becoming, because every
Some
morning we
continue.
get up and we open our eyes, we need to think about now what can I learn today? How can I improve my literacy level today? And it's not about just taking a book and reading 3 words.
Right.
It is about digital literacy, media literacy, information, the word skills literacy, all those things. All
But
those
there's
things.
a lot more that happens.
Yes.
The other thing I think we need to do is to professionalize the teacher's service, so that teachers see themselves as professional. They're exposed to professional development, not just what a workshop every now and then, but they're required to do, like doctors, lawyers, refresh your knowledge, stay on top of
Correct.
a journal, get
Right.
into in a journal, whatever, and become more professional. That will address the teaching methods, the things they don't know. They recognize they can go back. If we develop a culture in which teachers feel free to retrain, retool, go back to
Yes.
school and do something, I think that's what
Right.
is
A
really
good
important.
point. So maybe the start of the teaching commission, the teachers commission, I think that's what it's called. Will lead to that. Excellent points. Chanel, your last word.
It would be very remiss of me if I did not mention social skills.
Yes.
Social literacy. I will put the 2 together. We focus a lot on the academics and the technology, but I think Mr. Drace alluded to it earlier. We have to teach those soft skills, what we call soft skills, because our children, well, some people lack those basic social skills: respect for self, respect for each other, the ethics of work, those kinds of things. We need to reinforce them. We have them taught in schools, but I don't think that enough importance from maybe the home, maybe other persons in the education system, or teachers, I should say. I do not think that enough importance is placed on those things, because most times, sometimes when something has to go, it will be the soft skills. And those things are very, very important. Employers wouldn't be complaining that you have young people coming into their workplace who have no manners, or they don't know how to call and say, I'm not going to be coming in today. We need to put a lot of emphasis on those things, because it is a collaborative effort. It is not just academics, it is not just technology, but it is all these things that make for a well-rounded individual.
Perfect. Well said. Okay.
I have final thoughts. Not one word, many words.
We have
So how I will end, I will say, whether you're a student, educator, parent, community member, remember that literacy is not just about writing and reading. It's about empowerment, understanding, and opportunity. And by fostering strong literacy skills in ourselves and others, we can unlock endless possibilities for personal growth, academic success, and positive societal change.
Wonderfully beautiful. Thank you so much. Mr. Exciting Moment.
Okay, I'm going to put mine in a sentence too. I believe the acquisition of literacy skills would allow individuals to become productive, economically stable, emotionally balanced human beings to function in most instances as productive citizens of any country,
Yes.
creating that global citizen.
Global citizenship, sustainable development. You said all the right words. Excellent. And Stephen, Mr. Jackman?
Literacy has always been the linchpin of Barbadian education. We've had some long-held beliefs that we need to interrogate and that where necessary, we need to transform. Today, the task force helped kickstart the discussion needed to make literacy education relevant to the 21st century.
Wonderful. And the task force thanks you for that comment. And our final panelists.
I would like the task force in examining what was done this evening, that you keep in mind our boys learn different from our girls, and therefore the structures that need to be put in place must take into consideration how boys learn so that they can improve their rate of literacy.
Beautiful. And I believe one of our task force members, Dr. Astra Bab, is smiling because she does not let us forget those boys, and Dr. Saul. So I thank you so much. It is my final task to thank our panelists who responded brilliantly to the questions and have given us valuable recommendations for our report. Special thanks are extended to Mr. Bertley Lowe, Charmaine Seal, and the rest of the team for facilitating the activity. Of course, the Ministers of Education, our Chief Education Officer, and all staff of the Ministry of Education, Technological and Vocational Training, and staff, principal and staff of the UWI for their support of this activity. I cannot forget the media for promoting the events that we've been having, the members of the task force for working behind the scenes, checking the chat, making notes, and so on. I thank you so very much. And of course, I appreciate all those who stayed to view the event, those who have submitted suggestions, who submitted comments. And remember, we could not take everything this afternoon. So there's literacy 246 at mes.gov.bb. For all those who assisted in any way, I thank you. This is Sylvia saying good night from Under the Streetlight. Thank you.